Now, I always say to audiences, you shouldn't clap before a speaker has spoken because you don't know what he's going to say. Now, I hate speaking from a prepared text, but I'm going to do my little bit from a prepared text because if I didn't, I'd speak all night long. So it's the way I discipline myself. But I'm going to speak for about half an hour, and then I hope we can have good Q&A, and I will call the questions and then we'll take it from there. Is that okay? Good. Well, I'd like to start by reading the very first sentence of volume 1 of this book. And it was published about a year ago. And the very first sentence is as follows. Dear America, if our children, wherever they live, are to have the prospect of a future worth having, the world needs America's best, not what it had under the neocon regime of President Bush, its worst. The obvious question arising is, given that you Americans have so many problems on your plate at the moment, at every level, why the hell should you care about and become engaged in what's happening in the Middle East? It's a good question. My short answer is this. The conflict in and over Palestine that became Israel is the cancer at the heart of international affairs. And if it's not cured, there is a real danger that it will consume us all. Now, I make that as a simple statement for now, and if you want to take it up in questions, fine. Now, I think I can make best use of my time this evening by inviting you to consider 3 main realities that have to be faced. The first is that Zionism's in Israel leaders are not interested in peace on terms virtually all Palestinians and most other Arabs and Muslims could accept. Zionism cannot change. It is congenitally incapable of change. It wants today what it's always wanted, the maximum amount of land with the minimum number of Arabs on it. Yes, it's true that under verbal pressure from President Obama, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has let the words 2 states escape from his lips. But the 2 states he has in mind are the same 2 states that Ariel Sharon had in mind. It's 2 or 3 Bantustans on not more than 40 to 50% of the occupied West Bank, with all the illegal settlements which, not by accident, sit on top of all the main water aquifers. And that's simply not acceptable to the Palestinians, of course. The second and related reality to be faced can be summarized as follows. While it is true that the incredible superhuman steadfastness of the occupied and oppressed Palestinians is the rock on which all of us associated with the truth of history stand, the struggle is not going to be won or lost in Palestine. It's going to be won or lost here in America. That's the number one fact I'm going to ask you to grasp. The conclusion demanded by those 2 political realities is that there isn't a snowball's chance in hell of peace unless the major Western powers, led as they must be by America, are prepared to use the leverage they have to cause or try to cause enough Israelis to be serious about peace on the basis of an acceptable amount of justice for the Palestinians. The third reality to be faced is that because of the stranglehold of the Zionist lobby and its stooges in Congress on policy for Israel-Palestine, no American president is ever going to be free to use the leverage until he is pushed to do so by informed public opinion, by expressions, you might say, of real democracy in action. In other words, and for peace to have a real, and I believe, last chance, a constituency of understanding has got to be created in America to give the president the space to take on the Zionist lobby. As I put it in the epilogue of volume 3 of this book, which is going to be published within a week or so, for a president to have a chance taking on the Zionist lobby, he needs enough members of Congress to be more frightened of their voters than they are of the Zionist lobby. Now, as I dared to suggest in my Dear America introduction to the whole book, the problem is that most Americans are too uninformed and misinformed to do the pushing and make their democracy work. Simply stated, most Americans, like most Westerners, have been conditioned to accept a version of history, Zionism's version, which is simply not true. It is a pack of propaganda lies from beginning to end. It's not a question of a lie here and then some truth, and a lie here and then some truth. It is all entirely a propaganda lie. So what is the truth that Americans need to know in order to become engaged and make their democracy work? Well, obviously my long answer is in the 3 volumes of the book. In passing, I should tell you that it's about much more than its title suggests. Its title is Zionism, the Real Enemy of the Jews. What I've actually done, and it took 5 years of my life to do it, I've rewritten the entire history of the conflict from the beginning until a few weeks ago. It's up to date to Obama's surrender to Netanyahu and the Zionist lobby, and even includes General Petraeus' remark. But the reason why it's so long is because it's not just the events in the region that I'm reporting. I've given those events global context. I take my readers at every point behind closed doors in London, Paris, Washington, Moscow. So you can start out knowing nothing worth knowing about this conflict, which is frankly most Americans and most Westerners. And if you read through the book, it's easy to read, it's written in my television reporter's speaking style. If you read the whole thing, for the first time ever, you'll be able to make sense of the whole thing. I can only point to 2 of the truths of history that really must become common knowledge if support for the Zionist state of Israel, right or wrong, is to be ended. The biggest of all the lies is that poor little Israel has lived in constant danger of annihilation, but driving into the sea of its Jews. As I document in detail through the 3 volumes of my book, Israel's existence has never, ever been in danger from any combination of Arab force. Not in 1948, not in 1967, not even in 1973. Despite some stupid Arab rhetoric to the contrary, which suggested otherwise and gave Zionism the opportunity to tell its lie, the Arab regimes never ever had any intention of fighting Israel to liberate Palestine. Zionism's assertion to the contrary was the cover that allowed Israel to get away where it mattered most, here in America and Western Europe, with presenting its aggression as self-defense and itself as the victim when it was actually the oppressor. I'll briefly touch upon 1948 to tell you something I'm sure you don't know. When the elements of the Arab armies invaded in 1948, their objective was not the destruction of the unilaterally declared Jewish state. Their objective was simply to try to hold the land that had been assigned to the Arab state of the partition plan. In the diplomatic world, it was no secret that Ben-Gurion, Israel's founding father, wanted war because he knew he could take more land that way than what had been assigned by the partition plan. As some of you here will know, there is a first rule of war. It is know your enemy. Ben-Gurion knew the Arab enemy. He knew it was pretty much bloody useless. The Arabs had no idea of what Zionism could bring to the war fronts.